Hello, my name is Robert Capps, and in this video, I will be discussing how Abraham Lincoln's understanding of providential sovereignty reflects themes in Chapter 5 of Noll's America's God. We'll also examine how Lincoln's view compares with early theological voices like Jonathan Edwards. We will also see how historians like Alan Guelzo and George Marsden help us interpret these shifts. Let us begin with President Lincoln's private journal entry from September of 1862. The will of God prevails. Later, he continues with, both may be, and one must be wrong. In the whole of this journal entry, we see how the president is deeply reflective and almost clings to a Calvinistic view of sovereignty. That God's will transcends the desire of both the Union and the Confederacy. This also coincides with Jonathan Edwards' view that God's providence governs history even though it is not always revealed to humanity. Noll shows us that many Americans during the founding and the antebellum periods struggled to reconcile Enlightenment rationalism with his Christian theism. President Lincoln was certainly in this group, and he resisted the easiness of over spiritualizing one side of the war over the other. In his humility, we can see that Lincoln stood in contrast to the common political rhetoric of his day. In America's God, Noll discusses the similarities of evangelical theology with Republican political ideals. This similarity gave birth to a religious nationalistic pride that God had chosen America as his instrument. Lincoln strictly opposes this notion. He does not claim that God is for one side or the other. He rather suggests that both sides are a part of God's providential will. Noll continues with the explanation that by the mid 1800s that many Americans had replaced theology with moral activism. However, Lincoln, without regular religious counsel, shared in Protestant traditions of God's providence and human limitations. In Abraham Lincoln, Redeemer President, Alan Guelzo explains that Lincoln's view on providence became clearer during the war years. He was by no means a theologian, but he reflected a serious intellectual engagement with divine justice. George Marsden, in Understanding Fundamentalism and Evangelicalism, discusses that early American evangelicals were firm in their belief of divine sovereignty. Lincoln's journal entry, while not being evangelical in tone, stands in likeness to early American theological heritage. Lincoln, Noll, Guelzo, and Marsden together show us that the 19th century America was a place of theological wrestling. We are shown that faith and public life was connected in complex ways that were far greater than the party platforms. Maybe we can learn from our past during this current political period. In conclusion, we see that Lincoln's reflection during the Civil War was not just a moment of personal struggle, but rather a national struggle between ideology and theology. This should also challenge us to think about how belief in God's providence can shape humility rather than pride. Thank you for watching.